So, I'm a pretty big fan of Death Note. You might not expect this from somebody who rage quit the anime after L died, but I read the LABB, checked out the manga, and every few months I always find myself back into jamming with the musical adaptation. Because of course I am.
What good is law that can't punish those who break it?
But there's something interesting that comes from watching and analyzing and joking about the series the way people do. You can start to form a certain perspective from the text and confront aspects about it in a way that can be, well, a little antagonistic in regards to the original source material. Like, at first, you might think that Light might have had the right idea, just a really overblown execution. And then you realize that Death Note was probably not written with the intent of being an actual piece of commentary, just as an entertaining romp through the infernal machinations of two lesser evils that isn't meant to be taken all that seriously, and anything you read through it is on you. And then you realize that Light's a relatively privileged son of a cop in a country with a guilty before innocent policy regarding criminal activity. But besides all that, hey, is Light, like, actually gay? Like, gay? Like, can he be viewed as textually gay? Like, is he, you know? Let's be honest here, folks. We like our law lights and our BB lights when we're feeling spicy, and I'm sure somebody out there hasn't cared about Teru enough to give a shit about his feelings, but outside of the context of playing 4D chess just to make the horses kiss, I do think that there's a legitimate angle to take with this. First and foremost, the most obvious of the subtext before we work our way into the text. Light has a secret that he's attempting to hide from every single person in his life. This secret can alter their perspective of him drastically, and he'd be dead in the eyes of everybody he loves for it. Now, you might be saying, sure, that's a little severe in some contexts, but that's just a stock superhero trope if you really think about it. And yes, you know where I'm going with this. Every superhero story is indeed gay. But, to get back on topic, there's just this feeling I get as I watch Light carefully calculate what he'll say during dinner to maintain appearances, how he talks to his friends and romantic interest, how he speaks to L pre-chain. And there's this sense that I get that maybe the Light Yagami that fell from grace was never really there. And it's fun to joke about on some level. The kid was rigging his house to explode at the idea of somebody reading his diary in episode 2. He saw the slippery slope and decided to grab a sled. And it's borderline absurd! It's like if the Joker went to Office Max! But then you think about it. You think about the fact that this was a secret he was willing to die over. Willing to kill those he long since claimed he could protect over it. All to keep somebody from reading his diary. That was the lie he expected to blow over so well with the chief of police. And wouldn't it? And then you realize that maybe you could believe it. Coming from him, because Light Yagami was never really there. Because Light nearly never let the mask drop. Because wasn't he that same mask? Wasn't he that same performance? And very little else? There's an author I like who works within the Death Note community, Trans Light Yagami, who once compared Light to a house with a basement. And I feel like that conveys who Light is better than any pondering I could do over wearing a mask of your own face. There are houses that don't have basements, houses that don't need them, and houses that do. But you wouldn't be able to guess just from looking at a house whether or not it has a basement, or if it's just only one story. Only when you finally fling open that door can you really know. And I think there's a very good possibility that you might have a basement inside you, too. Who knows? Have you checked? It feels very awkward to try to transition this segment about the interpersonal journeys we're all on as we try to find our authentic selves Even when there's nothing to be found to go on to say, oh, well, he's gay because every date he goes on in this series is just a power play or manipulation, or, oh, he's gay because he's close with Elle in a way that other characters are not. And, the thing is, I feel like we can't talk about these aspects of these characters without this idea of Light Yagami playing at being a one-story house. Light Yagami goes on dates with girls because he feels like he should be, as a boy his age, even if he's never cared for any of them. The same reason he looks at porno mags as if he's a bored teenage girl filling out a quiz about flavored lip balm. All of it is about the performance of the one-story house of the perfect son. People have joked that if Light really cared about throwing off the police investigation, he should have actually whipped it out and committed to the bit. But that's not the bit he was committing to. He's not playing the average teenage boy. He's supposed to be the perfect son. It's embarrassing, sure, but not illicit, not damnable. Even if his father was a bit chuffed at the thought, he's probably seen worse on TV. However, Elle has long since figured out that there's a basement. He just doesn't have the key to prove that it exists. But he knows. And Light knows that he knows. And knows enough to know he has something to hide. And in a way, that leads to what could be considered his most dangerous connection, but also the closest one he has to true intimacy, even if not an overtly romantic sort of intimacy. I truly believe that this is the closest relationship Light has throughout this series with anyone, which explains why Light's downfall was only inevitable after Elle died, in which he fell into more doldrums and had no limits left to reach past or lines left to cross. Elle was the only person that Light really related to, and the only one who could match him or his mentality. And I'm trying really hard not to sound like this is my one big ship manifesto on why these two deserve to end up together. Lord knows I've already done enough of that, but it's kind of hard not to when discussing their relationship at all. They're narrative foils. It's practically meant to be. Even if we operate on the idea that the two of them hated each other the entire goddamn time they spent together, that doesn't change the fact that they still considered the other formidable threats worth battling with borderline endlessly for the sake of claiming the blindfold of justice. And that wouldn't explain why Light lost all esteem when it came to having similar battles against Nier if Elle were not special to him in some capacity, even if he was just another person to hate. Nier was halfway down those basement stairs and was hardly aware there was a house to begin with. Elle was the one who found the basement door but couldn't necessarily prove that it was there, or open it to its fullest extent until after he died. Light Yagami is a one-story house that just happens to have a basement. You might say that he's more basement than house, but the maintenance of the house, even to the very end of his days, is a statement that can't be carried to its fullest conclusion. It's as simple as that. This reading of the text implies that everything that Light does is for the sake of performance. There never was a Light Yagami, or a Kira. They're one and the same because there's nobody and nothing else. The only thing he can do is change his name. Kira is the perfect god, and Light Yagami is the perfect son. He does whatever he can to perform these roles, even when they contradict his true self. So he dreams of being a member of the police, even though he has the grades to become anything else. He dates girls he's overall uninterested in. He's sociable and friendly enough to be considered popular and worth hanging out with, but he's not sociable and friendly enough to really be close with any one person. And then there's Elle. Elle, who is not the pure good who will vanquish his great evil, but the lesser evil determined to choke him out regardless, if only for the fun of the fight. Elle, who's aware of the performance and unwilling to play his part, which is exactly what Light's performance requires him to do, but the fact that he's even aware of the performance at all keeps him shaky and off balance. Anyhow, TLDR, Light's gay due to much of the subtext regarding the idea of having to act a certain way to avoid being exposed as the person you really are, and much of the homoerotic subtext seems to come from the writing despising the woman characters and upholding the relationship between Elle and Light as the most fulfilling one he has. But surely, that wasn't intentional in some way. It's not like this author has a specific way that he writes about women and male friends that could lead to any value coming from looking at his later work and analyzing the author. Right? Death of the author refers to the idea that an author's previous background, life experience, accomplishments, or even the very same things that the author would go on to say about the text, whether inside of it or out, holds no bearing on how a work is to be read or interpreted, which is primarily useful when the author is dead and can't be asked questions about their work anyhow, or is notably obtuse and is not worth asking anyhow. This is a very limited view on how this framing device works. If you're not already at least familiar with the idea, just think of it as the My City Now of the literary theory world. I'm usually for this philosophy as it's, for a lack of a better turn of phrase, convenient for me, my work, and my writing on these kinds of videos. However, I feel like Oba and Obata's later work in Bakuman shines a light on how to view Death Note under my specific lens. For context, Bakuman is a series that seems to be inspired by Oba and Obata's own creative partnership, as it's a coming-of-age story primarily starring two kids who want to become partners and mangaka, in the trials and tribulations of working in the industry. It's an interesting watch, and I learned quite a lot. But I also learned that Tsugimi Oba seems to hate writing women. Like, I wouldn't call it Naruto levels of bad, but I don't know Naruto well enough to argue either way. You might have noticed in Death Note there were like 7 notable female characters. Notable, meaning named or plot relevant. 3 of which were used for fan service, 2 of which died tragically, and 2 of which served as love interests for Light. And Bakuman makes sure that there's even less, but quantity doesn't make quality, you know? Except let's have a whole chapter in the first volume completely surrounding the idea that the best thing for a woman to do is to get married and become somebody's wife. And that the smartest girl in class is actually dumb for trying so hard because it makes her unlikable to him. And of course, men have dreams that women wouldn't understand. This isn't jest or irony or a way of showing that these characters have a lot of growing up to do. In context, this is a scene that's meant to show how intelligent this one character is for being able to analyze his classmates like this. And I didn't even include much of the cellar aspects of this scene, where it gets worse. But that's not the point. Do you know what Oba seems to hate more than writing women? Writing gay couples. Like, I can prove that the fucky-wucky romantic writing in Bakuman is specifically in response to the reading of Light and L as a couple, who could conceivably be gay and in love. But Bakuman did begin serialization about 2 years after Death Note as a TV series aired in 2006, and I feel like that would explain a bit. Okay, you know what? You guys are getting a full expose about how fucky-wucky the romantic arc in Bakuman is for our main protagonists. Okay, this is Akito Takagi, this is Mashiro Moritaka, and this is Miho Azuki. Moritaka and Azuki like each other, but never say anything about it even though it's been like 10 years. However, through Takagi, they have entered into an agreement that Takagi and Moritaka will draw a manga that gets turned into an anime, so that way Azuki can voice act in it. And when they all accomplish this together, Moritaka and Azuki will get married, but they can't see each other before that happens because... hold on. Something distance makes the heart grow fonder? I got nothing. Okay, cool. Abstract this and you get, like, the most insane relationship dynamic you've ever seen. This series will wax on about how in love these two are, and yet construct a reason for the two of them to never have to see each other again. Not just that, but the series finds a way to completely romanticize how totally apart these people are. And so do the other characters within the narrative. They're so detached from each other in so many ways that the only reason you assume that their relationship has progressed at all from the time that they sat next to each other in school and could barely look at each other to the end is just the progression of time. Not even within the series. I'm talking about what I watched in the lunchroom in high school for like 3 months. That kind of progression of time. They see each other occasionally through the series, but seriously. So much of the series is just Moritaka saying, I can't email Azuki to ask which university she picked. If we end up at separate schools, we end up at separate schools. And live lives there as if we're not touched by each other's hearts. But I live on in spite of that. And then platonic cool friend Takagi will slide him and be like, wow, I really admire you and this romance you have. You're amazing, and I'm lucky to have you as my friend and partner in manga making. And then we don't see Azuki for like 5 episodes. Maybe she'll check her phone once and smile. That's it. Her journey means shit. The manga, to its credit, seems to at least imply that Takagi is a little more weary about this whole ordeal than Moritaka is, and seems a little bit aware that this whole arrangement is strange. But you would not know. Takagi gets married. We see him get married within this series. We see his wedding. The only virtue I'll give that relationship is at least we get to see it progress. On screen. But out of context, it's hearing that your last series was interpreted as homoerotic for having 2 male leads share a bond closer to each other than any other character, female or otherwise, that you basically double down and say, oh yeah? Try to say they're gay now when one is engaged to be engaged, and this one gets married. And I say easy as sin, because now you've made it weird as hell. I think I'd believe in an arranged marriage more than Moritaka and Azuki's relationship, just based on how pathologized it is. I feel like they're 3 steps away from getting into soaking at all times.
I will bring the power of the hurricane.
In the Death Note musical, there's a song called There Are Lines, sung by Soichiro Yagami. It is right before Light joins the Kira investigation, and the premise is that there are lines that are not meant to be crossed in the pursuit of justice. There are limits to how far you can go before you become just as bad as the thing that you're chasing.
You don't kill a man just to buy a clue. This is not a plan lawmen can pursue.
And Light agrees with him.
Father, you know that I feel as you do for these lessons I've learned at your knee.
I don't know if this is me just going, what the fuck, little gay-ass riff, as I imagine Light sauntering across the stage to comfort his father in regards to the fact that he raised a good little boy, with good little morals. But, Father, you know me. You must know that I feel the same as you, because you're the one who taught me. And do you dare consider the idea that you taught your perfect son wrong? He establishes his relationship with his father, and re-establishes his identity before asking for what he really wants.
And I think maybe by working with you, helping you will be helpful for me.
The Death Note musical was not written by either Oba or Obata, and it certainly doesn't need my help in regards to the homoeroticism department, because the gays are awarded in equal proportion with the Ramisa subplot and the entirety of playing his game. However, I feel like it understands Death Note as a story a lot better than a lot of other adaptations. Light isn't some poor little meow meow who just stumbles into madness on his quest to enlighten the world. You think he is, until the end of the story and you realize that's just how he's always been. His internal monologues have just turned into external dialogue, and his private soliloquies into song. It understands that Light Yagami is more or less a person suit for whatever might be lurking underneath the skin. Today, it's named Kira. Tomorrow, who knows what might have been named. And him being gay just adds another layer to what he might be hiding beneath that person's suit, and subsequently adds another layer of depth to the narrative. Because Light being gay wouldn't matter throughout the course of the story. Romance is a tool of tragedy in the world of Death Note, and it's not like Light canonically liking men would stop him from killing L or dating Misa if he really thought it would forward his goals. But it adds to the layers of subtext of what it means to hide being Kira by giving the audience further context into not just what else he might be hiding, but how much of his true self he is. And that's like Yagami and the value that comes from queer coding him. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. If you were looking for a video that goes over basically every canon instance of gay code life throughout the series instead of something closer to 3-verse poetry, I hope you still enjoyed this, and I hope I was clear in any capacity. God, I can only hope. Do all the usual stuff YouTubers ask you to do, or don't. I won't pry. I have a Patreon, but so does everyone. Until then, I assure you that the next time we meet, I will most certainly be talking about some more random bullshit.